sign things. You know, I think I'm signing, or some department head would sign something, look into something. Maybe it wouldn't even come to the county board, or maybe it would. Kind of go through committees, and if the committee votes for it to be researched and move forward, that's what.
Being 7 o'clock, I'll call the Marathon County Board of Supervisors to order, please. Please rise. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing after the Pledge of Allegiance because that will be followed by a moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we'll have the reading of the notice, please.
The adjourned organizational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, composed of 38 members, will convene at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, Wausau, on Tuesday, September 17th, 2019 at 7 p.m. And the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you. I would like to request everyone please silence their cell phones and any other electronic devices as to not be an interruption to the meeting. And we will proceed on to roll call, and I would ask all supervisors please sign in. And we will proceed. And I would like to welcome all the guests that we have here tonight, our viewing public, viewing audience on the public channel. I would also like to recognize we have two young men here tonight that are affiliated with the Boy Scouts, are working on their Citizenship for the Community badge. So I'd invite those two individuals to stand and be recognized. So thank you for your interest. And we will proceed on to item number B, presentations and or reports. And I would invite the sheriff to the podium and go to item number 7, the Sheriff's Department Life Saving Awards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also, thank you to the county board for allowing us to take some time before your meeting here today.
Scott, could you
Turn on the mic.
mic, please?
On the ledge. Way back there. You gotta get in. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's been a lot of discussion about the county jail lately over the past couple of months about some issues that we've had over there. And I appreciate all the work that you people are doing to assist us in that endeavor. Tonight's entirely different, though. It's to reward 3 of our individuals, our corrections officers, in regards to a line of duty award and medal that they're about to receive. So I'm going to just open this up here. Standing before you are corrections officers Diana Christensen, Justin Forster, and Corporal Sean Schnelly, just in the order that you have here. On August 24th, 2019, at approximately 4 p.m., corrections officers were conducting a routine check of the cell blocks in the Marathon County Jail and came upon a suicide attempt in progress. Corrections officers Diana Christensen, Justin Forrester, and Corporal Sean Schnelly immediately entered the cell block, taking action and removing the inmate from his suspension, allowing the ligature to be removed from around his neck, and therefore causing him to start breathing once again. As a result of this action, that inmate is still with us, still going through a lot of medical treatment though, from my understanding. Subject's revived, transferred, and is now in mental health attention. For their efforts in this particular event, I'm commending them and awarding them with the Marathon County Sheriff's Office Life Saving Award. Present to you our newest award medals. Justin. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Sheriff, and congratulations to the members of the Corrections Division. I think they do an outstanding job, and it always is a reflection on the quality of workforce that Marathon County has working for us. So we will move on to item number C, proclamation number 8, declaring September 15th, 20 through the 21st, 2019, Farm Safety and Health Week in Marathon County. Supervisor Wagner with the motion and Supervisor Seiler with the second. And I would invite the clerk to read the proclamation, please.
Whereas in 1944, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the first proclamation for farm safety due to the high injury rate in agriculture. And whereas agriculture is at the core of Marathon County's heritage, identity, plans for the future, and land use. And whereas dairy is the predominant agriculture enterprise in Marathon County, and the diversity of agricultural enterprises is growing to include Christmas trees, ginseng, maple syrup, vegetables, fruits, and horticulture. And whereas Marathon County farmers and their families are exposed to hazards inherent to farming, such as tractors, machinery, livestock, chemicals, and workplace environments, these hazards can have a significant adverse impact on health and safety. And whereas agriculture is one of the most hazardous industries in the United States with a death rate of 21.3 per 100,000 workers and approximately 130,000 disabling injuries. And whereas the average age of an agricultural producer is 53 years old, and older farmers may be at greater risk due to reduced physical ability. Children and youth may not have the maturity or expertise to fully understand the risks or have the physical or cognitive ability to perform tasks safely. And whereas many injuries are preventable through education, serious injuries and death can be prevented by cautiously approaching field adjustments or repairs, taking precautions to avoid slips and falls, making smart decisions while assigning tasks to youth, using and maintaining the slow-moving vehicle emblem correctly, and retrofitting tractors with rollover structures. And whereas self-employed farm operators and their family members, as well as hired workers, manage and sustain our country's farm production operations. This healthy and productive workforce is critical to ensuring the long-term sustainability and the success of family farms and overall rural prosperity. And whereas National Farm Safety and Health Week serves as a great opportunity to reflect and revisit the importance of safety on farms, as well as adopt new and innovative practices to promote the awareness of safety solutions year-round. Now therefore be it resolved that Marathon County encourages all our agricultural producers to integrate safe practices and technologies into our agricultural production systems. Be it further resolved that the week of September 15 through 21, 2019 is declared Farm Safety and Health Week in Marathon County, and all Marathon County producers, along with agriculture safety and health organizations, are encouraged to work together to mitigate farm risks. Dated this 17th day of September, 2019.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? All right, we will proceed to vote.
Go ahead.
Okay, we're still in
Oh.
discussion.
Okay, there you go. Sorry.
Supervisor Durham, if you would please vote and confirm, please. Thank you, and we will proceed. And the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. And we will move on to item D, the consent agenda, items 9 through 13A1. What is your pleasure? Supervisors, are any with a motion, and Supervisor Butke with a second? Any discussion on the consent agenda items? Again, D9 through D13A1. Any discussion? Seeing none, we will proceed to vote. And we will proceed. And the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. And we'll move on to ordinances. Item E14, ordinance, amending the General Code of Ordinances for Marathon County, Chapter 13, Livestock Facility Licensing Ordinance Code, Ordinance 19-19. We have Supervisor White with the motion and Supervisor Schaefer with the second. Any discussion? Any discussion? Supervisor Durham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Use the mic, please.
Thank you. I was remiss and I was absent on the last meeting, but I'm wondering, reading through that, on page 26, it talks about fees for permits, but it doesn't state the fees. I mean, I just am wondering what they range in, or does anyone have an idea of what the fees are?
I would invite the Supervisor Langenhahn.
And we, thank you, Mr. Chair, and we also have our department head, Becky Frisch from CPZ here with us tonight, but, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe those fees are part of another document, and it wouldn't be appropriate for them to be within that code. Becky, you can correct me. Now, as far as the exact numbers, I don't know those off the top of my head.
And I apologize too, because I do not know the exact numbers, but Jacob is correct that a year or two ago, the Environmental Resources Committee, or the former Land Conservation and Zoning Committee, decided to take the fees out of the ordinance language and have it in a separate schedule that they review every year. So there's a fee structure set up for all of our regulatory programs, and we can get that information to you if you would like.
And in particular, this one, the state says it must be reflective of the cost and it cannot exceed certain levels that the state has set on those fees for the licensing.
And then we have a savvy younger member of our staff here, Lance Leonard, who handed me the fee schedule. So is there a specific thing you want? What fee? The highest fee is $750.
I did have a follow-up.
Go ahead.
The question that I have is,
Please use the mic, Supervisor.
the question I have is, there are a lot of details in compliance when you read through there.
Correct.
Who is responsible for overseeing that compliance?
The
It
land
says
cons-
a director, but who is this? Or is it a group of people, or what? Because there's a lot to that, really.
It is the Conservation Department and the Conservation staff.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Gums.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. That was sort of my same question. Who really makes sure that the actual number of animal units is correct, or the amount of manure put on the land is exactly, or is sort of what was marked down to be? Anyone?
The land conservation conservationists are the ones that along with the input from the producer, utilize the nutrient management plan, and so the nutrient management soil testing are the results that they're utilizing, along with inspections of those licensed facilities as far as verification of the animal units. Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, sometimes the animals are actually counted then.
That is correct.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, any other questions on ordinance E-14? Again, ordinance 0-19-19. Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we will proceed. And the motion is carried unanimously. Now we are down to ordinance E-15, the motion to reconsider amending section 2.05 of the General Code of Ordinances, Administrator Recruitment Task Force chapter to correct error in membership, ordinance 20-19. And I would ask the Corp Counsel to give a brief explanation.
Sure. What I'm hoping to do is to clear up an error that I made on the charter that I brought to you last month. There was a executive committee meeting just before the county board meeting, and they made one change to the charter regarding recommendations to the executive committee. And I was working off of an earlier draft, and we sent that along, and then we presented that earlier draft to you for approval that night. And there was one difference between the earlier draft and the document that the committee was working off of, and that was in the area of membership. So if you look at this, it's page 35 on the record that I have, and the error was that the document that I provided to you said that one of the members would be a representative of municipal government, city, village, and town, and it had already been determined that that probably was a little vague, and what was really needed with respect to the recruitment task force was a representative of the County Executives and Administrators Association. What I'm asking for is a motion to reconsider to correct that error, and then upon reconsideration, a motion to approve this amendment that's before you.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to reconsider. Supervisor Stark with a motion, Supervisor Wagner with a second for a motion to reconsider. And so now is there any discussion on the motion to reconsider? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote on the motion to reconsider. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried unanimously. So where we're at, folks, right now is where that resolution or that task force charter was approved. So now I would look for and entertain a motion to amend to include the correct membership that the executive committee recommended, and that was a member from the execs and or administrators rather than the wording that was in there. Supervisor Stark with a motion, Supervisor Durham with a second to include in the task force membership a member from the Wisconsin County's administrator and or execs as a member instead of the actual wording in the resolution that was passed out. Is there any discussion on that amendment? Is there any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote on the amendment. And we will proceed, and the motion is carried. Now we need a vote. Is there any discussion on the task force charter as amended? Any discussion on the task force as amended? Supervisor Gums?
Yeah, thanks.
We're not hearing you.
Try this.
You must have wore it out.
We're down. Why was the first term supervisor, why was that used? What was the thought process of that?
That was brought forward, and the discussion was that the member of first-term supervisor have input into the discussion as far as the task force responsibilities. And it was a suggestion, and the executive committee agreed that it was a good idea to have a first-term supervisor on that task force. Follow up?
Yeah. Well, I do think that's a good idea because you were sort of the old member, and Craig was sort of the middle-aged member, and then you have a young person. I compliment you on that. It was good.
I resemble that remark as being old. Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion on the table to approve the task force charter as amended? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we will proceed, and the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. And now we have item number F, number 16, Administrator Recruitment Task Force Appointments. And I would ask the clerk to read the appointments that I have brought forward to this point.
I, Kurt Gibbs, Marathon County Board Chair, do hereby, upon approval of the Board of Supervisors, appoint the following individuals to serve on the Marathon County Administrator Recruitment Task Force, created by Ordinance 0-15-19, dated August 27th, 2019. Kurt Gibbs, Chair; Craig McEwen, Vice Chair; Romy Wagner, First-Term Supervisor; Mike Tomczyk, Vice President, Finance and Treasurer of Colby & Colby; Adam Payne, Sheboygan County Administrator; and Dr. Lori Wires, President of NTC. Mileage will be reimbursable upon request, dated this 17th day of September, 2019.
What is your pleasure? Supervisor Longhorn with the motion and Supervisor Pfeffrick with the second. Any discussion? Supervisor Zhang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did had a concern with the fact at the last meeting, if the board recall, I did have a concern with this task force not being I guess representing the citizens of Marathon County in the sense of what we're looking for. I did have a change of heart after talking with the chairman about this, but I just want to reemphasize that when we're putting together the hiring panel in the future here, I'm hoping that the task force here would better serve, will serve all representatives of all citizens of Marathon County. Diversity means having a seat at the table. Inclusion means having a voice, and belonging means having that voice be heard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would also agree with Yi Lang. I am a little concerned because it's all of our responsibility to make sure that diverse voices are represented. We're more than 50% women. We have whatever percentage, 8% of our population is Southeast Asian. So I think when we're talking about this and appointing members to this committee, we need to consider that it is also our job to reflect those voices and faces of our county.
Supervisor Guild.
Just curious, I know that in the previous iteration of this list, it did include an attorney to be determined. I see that there's no reference to that anymore. Just wondering what the status is since we did, that was part of the original discussion.
I've reached out to several individuals and have one individual that had extensive municipal experience turned me down. I have extended it to another individual, and that individual has to take it to the law firm's board of directors, and they are meeting tomorrow, so I will hear back tomorrow. And once I hear back, I will be bringing that name forward if that board approves that potential individual to serve.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we will proceed, and the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. We will move on to resolutions. Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee, item G17, a resolution approving the 2020 Capital Improvement Program projects. This is not, does not include the financing or the dollars. It is just approving the programs as they were ranked. Resolution 50-19. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Christensen and second by Supervisor Seiler. Any discussion on the resolution 50-19, again, approving the 2020 Capital Improvement Program projects? We have Supervisor Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the center of proposed project to add jail roof at $610,000, is that because of the bad winter last year, or is that just the...
What it is the project, when that project, that expansion of the jail was put on, there was a membrane roof, but at the time, they were always what they called ballasted roofs, which means that there was gravel, rocks put on top of the membrane to hold it down. Their new, the new process, and it's at its end of life, and with the remodel and the engineer's recommendation is to remove that ballast, that rock, to reduce the weight and replace that with a membrane roof that is glued down. So that is what that project entails.
Okay, a follow-up, Mr. Does that include the whole jail or just the 98 expansion?
It's just the 98 expansion portion.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad to see that the library stonework repair is on here. I know that we've been dealing with that roof and that membrane and the windows for the last decade since I've been on that library board. So I just want to highlight that and encourage members of the CIP committee to consider that we're really going to need that fixed. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the CIP plan project? Program projects. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. Supervisor Seiler, please vote and confirm. Thank you, and we will proceed. And the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. We have number H, Infrastructure Committee, item 18, County Bridge and Culvert Aid, Resolution 51-19. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Drayback and second by Supervisor Schaefer. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we will proceed. And the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Move on to item number H, Health and Human Services Committee. Number 19, declaring September as National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month in Marathon County. Resolution 52-19. Supervisor Johnson with the motion, Supervisor Rosenberg with the second. Any discussion? We have Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason this one kind of hits home is I was having a conversation over the last month with one of our circuit court judges, and he had intake that week, and he was telling me about Monday morning when he had 8 attempted suicides come before him for civil commitments that happened over one weekend, all young women that attempted suicide. This could not be more timely. If one life is saved, if one life is impacted, it's more than worth it, and this is very necessary, and I'm very happy to see it here. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I went to the overdose task force in the beginning of August, and at the time they said that we had already had 15 suicides in Marathon County, and now it's the middle of September, and we've had 19. So we're on track for a record year. It's devastating for families and anybody that's impacted by this. Our mental health is really important, and I think in addition to this resolution, we need to maybe have more community conversations about mental health and suicide awareness and prevention. Just throwing it out there, the more we talk about this, the more destigmatized it gets. It's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to not feel okay. So just putting that out there.
Okay, any further discussion? Supervisor Krause.
Yes, I'd like to mention that I know one of the family where this young woman did attempt suicide. She drank a couple of bottles of Fifth and took a couple of bottles of pills. And what it was, the cause of, she received a letter saying that she would be fined so much money and spend so many days in jail because she had smoked marijuana. And she was found on her floor unresponsive, and she was in a coma for quite a while. So I just thought I'd mention it, that there are issues that are causing people to attempt suicide. We need to address those. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we will proceed. And the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item I, 19A, resolution approving the cooperation agreement for Community Development Block Grant, CDBG program, resolution 53-19. We have Supervisor Butke with the motion and Supervisor Seefelt with the second. Any discussion on this agenda item? Supervisor Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm familiar with the city community development block grant. Is this strictly a county? And it's got 7 or 8 counties in there.
It's a regional community block grant. And so Marathon County, in order to participate, has to be a member of the region.
But it is not anything, okay, thank you.
It has nothing to do with the City of Wausa's CDGB. Yep. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we will proceed. And the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. We have item J, a motion to go into closed session. Roll call vote suggested and the Supervisor Schaefer, if you would please read the whole motion.
Okay. Motion to go into closed session, roll call vote suggested pursuant to section 19.85, parent 1, parent F, Wisconsin statute for the purpose of parent C, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific person, except where para 19.85, para 1, para B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such history or data, or involved in such problems or investigations, parents, to wit, appointment of successor county clerk.
Is there a second? Supervisor Mask with a second. And let me be clear to this board, this is a very narrow exception to go into closed session, and there is one issue that is going to be discussed in closed session, and all the rest of the discussion will be in open session, and there will be no vote in closed session. So there is one item that has been brought forward to be discussed in closed session. Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're all elected officials here, and in that position, we all hold a certain level of trust, and there's different levels of trust throughout our lives. We have personal trust, professional trust, and the hardest to earn and the hardest to maintain is political trust. Heck, we all know that the public doesn't trust politicians. That's not their default position, right? So we're talking about trusting and gaining the trust of our constituents. Now, Wisconsin has always had a tremendous reputation for open and honest government. We created the Daylight, the Sunshine Act. We created all these great things which gave citizens access. Now, this motion is in order under that very, very narrow scope, barely. It's a bit of a stretch, but what we're talking about here is we're talking about the consideration for an appointment to a political position. We're not hiring somebody, we're making a political appointment. So let's be very clear about that. And the clerk's position is a very important position. I mean, the free and fair elections are the bedrock on which our republic is built. And our chief elections officer is the clerk of Marathon County. That position demands the public trust. And as you know, my default position when the vacancy first arose, or came to light.
Board's already spoken to that issue and
no, I'm not done yet, please. Please. I'm just pointing this out.
I understand you voted against the.
I understand, yeah, okay, please let me go, please. So, because I felt that the public should have input. Now, we're in a position where the majority of the board chose to appoint this position. And in my opinion, I believe the public has every right to know everything this board is considering. Now, understand that when you throw your name in the ring, whether it is for an election or an appointment to a constitutional office that is held by virtue of elections in normal times and could have been this time, but the board chose to fill by utilizing an appointment, the same level of scrutiny must be applied, and it must be open, and it must be honest. Now, I think it's unfortunate. Now, Mr. Chair, I came to you last Thursday morning, just before noon, and I asked you not to move forward with this appointment because this gives me no great pleasure. It does not. I dread this. I've been sick over it. But the right of the citizens to know overrides any individual's right, especially when they chose to put their hat in the ring. I wish, again, that you had pulled this appointment because I do not relish doing anyone's reputation harm, but I do not relish putting the county at risk and our free and fair elections at risk. And I'm afraid that's where we're at. And your attempt, you did pull it from the agenda on Thursday, only to say we'll consider it in closed session. I have a huge problem with that
because this information about all the candidates, all 5 of the finalists, is relevant and should have been known to the board. In August, I asked you for the names of the finalists and their resumes, and I asked that it be sent out to all of the board members. Nothing was sent. 2 days later, I made an open records request, which I received mysteriously, the information, after I spoke with you last Thursday, and along with a profound apology from someone for the little delay. Now, the reality is that we really haven't been informed along the way. I've asked that we be informed. The public certainly hasn't been informed. And I think they have a right to know. I mean, I did do a little background check. I'm a private detective. I didn't use anything but public sources. I didn't dig into anybody's background. There is no information that I found that is not available to the general public through public means. I will pass that information out to all the board members. They have a right to know that. They have a right to consider it. It is my position that even though going to closed session is allowed, it is not mandated. This is a choice we have to make. Do we want to hide information? Because it's going to come out after the closed session. You can't stop that. So do you really want to be in the position of going into a closed session, coming out with a recommendation, going back into open session, voting it, and then having the crap hit the fan when people say, why didn't we know about this? When the public says, why didn't we know? I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to have to answer for that. I don't think anyone on the board should have to. This should be an open, and I apologize if somebody's going to get hurt, but then don't throw your name in the ring for a public position, an elected position, especially one that requires such trust and such honesty and integrity that we can't put it at risk. And I'm going to pass it out right now. You can object all you want. I'm passing it out now. I still have the floor. And I hope that, folks take a look. I've got a number of copies. I'm just going to set them down, ask you to pass them around. If you don't want to do it, Jake, I'll be happy to walk them around. But, sorry about that. But I think this is information the public needs to know. Because it doesn't get any more important. You're chief elections official. We have to have confidence in our elections, Mr. Chair. So I would urge everyone to please vote to remain in open session. Sorry about that. Vote to remain in open session so the public can be informed. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? Any? Supervisor Bovee and then Supervisor Zhang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Bovee first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to ask you if the item that you cited for going into closed session is available as public information, and if so, is going to public or closed session really necessary?
I will refer to the Corp Council because it has been discussed in great depth as to the particular very narrow scope of the one issue that is being discussed.
And I'll begin by saying I'm sorry, we're probably putting a little bit of the cart before the horse. What we anticipate is that there'll be a discussion in open session regarding the whole process of the interviews and the evaluation of the various candidates. And there are several issues that may be discussed that appear in public information, and any other concerns that any other board members might have about the proposed appointees' qualifications. So we anticipate that all of that is going to be done in open session. The narrow issue, as has been described to me, is one of those items that is of public record is a judgment by the Department of Children and Families against the proposed appointee, and she has provided an explanation of that that certainly goes beyond the public record, and we have responded to that explanation by conducting an investigation. And so the information that we wish to present and discuss with the board is only on that narrow issue, and it's anticipated that once we come out of closed session, there'll be the rest of the issues will be discussed.
Okay, Supervisor Zhang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Corporate counsel already answered my question, so thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? The motion is to go into closed session. We will proceed to vote. And we will proceed. And the motion is carried. Now, the question I have to the board is, who do you wish to stay in the closed session? My suggestion would be, does the board wish to ask the specific candidate any question on this particular item? You can, at a later point, ask if you want to discuss that item later. You can ask the candidate to leave. So I would recommend that we have the administrator, the deputy administrator, the corp counsel, the candidate, and the acting clerk. Supervisor Langenhan.
Our HR manager?
And excuse me, our HR director. Supervisor Stark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we discuss this, I guess I would just ask whether or not the candidate would request to be present so that they could respond to anything regardless of questions, that not questions, but to respond to the discussion.
And the candidate has said in this case she wishes to be available to respond to any questions that any supervisor has. So will be in closed session, and we will resume into open session as soon as we are done. So I would ask that we remove the individuals and have the public television turned off. We'll also not be using the PA announcements and the public address system. And so once we have the boardroom cleared, other than those, is there any objection to those individuals staying in the closed session? The individuals that I mentioned: administrator, deputy administrator, HR director, corp counsel, the candidate, along with the acting clerk. Any objections to those individuals participating in the closed session? Okay. Public television is back with us. So possible announcements and actions resulting from the closed session is moving on to item number 20, appointment to the county. Sorry, excuse me. We're moving on to item L. Possible announcements or actions resulting from the closed session, and the item was discussed and to the satisfaction of the board. And we're moving on now to item L20, appointment to the county clerk. What is your pleasure? A motion by Supervisor Schaefer and second by Supervisor Christensen. And any discussion, and before we get into the discussion, I would invite the HR department head and chair, or department head of the HR department, to provide a detail on the process that was utilized in this appointment and recruitment. Is there any objection? Is there any objection to having the department head of the HR department provide a detailed explanation of the process that was utilized in this recruitment process? With no objection, we'll move forward. So I invite Frank Mattel, department head, please.
Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our recruitment process to fill this county clerk position. We really handled this recruitment like we would any administrative recruitment in Marathon County. We think that hiring great employees is probably the most important thing we can do as an organization. So we take great pride in hiring the best employees. So we opened it up for recruitment on July 26th, and we closed the recruitment on August 12th. We advertised in the Wausau Daily Herald print and online paper on Sunday, the 28th of July. Also put the opening on the county website, Job Center, Indeed.com, and we had an email that went out to all the municipal clerks in the county. We do a job review, analysis, met with the county clerk, make sure we understand the duties, responsibilities, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we need in a county clerk. We update that, and then we, announce the job. We developed some job-related screening criteria. I think that's in your packet. Also emailed that along with the announcement a couple weeks ago to everybody. We did an applicant screening, Chairman Gibbs, myself, and a staff member, Sue Fox, in my department. We screened the candidates based on that screening criteria. We invited 5 candidates for interviews. We had a structured interview. We had an interview panel of Chairman Gibbs, Vice Chairman McEwen, Deputy County Administrator Lance Leonard, myself, and Sue Fox from my office. We had 10 questions we asked our candidates, but we also had a background check on those 5 finalists conducted by the Sheriff's Department. So the panel looked at that as well. And one of the questions that we did ask the candidates that I think was kind of, I'll just read that to you. An essential component of the county clerk position is ensuring integrity in public elections and maintaining public trust and confidence. Is there anything in your background that might otherwise be concerning that you would like to have an opportunity to explain? So all our candidates were asked that question, and they all answered it. And of course, we took that into consideration. Our questions were designed to assess some of those important knowledge, skills, and abilities that we needed. We were looking at professional development and achievements, core value behavior, openness to continuous improvement, ability to train others and experience actually training others, customer service, emotional intelligence, supervisory experience and their leadership philosophy, integrity, public trust, verbal, nonverbal communication skills. We looked at the content of their answers and their poise in answering. After we interviewed all the candidates, we independently ranked the candidates 1 through 5. After that, we had a discussion regarding the candidates, and we all unanimously determined that Kim Trueblood was the best candidate for the county clerk position. It was unanimous. Kim was initially hired into the county in a full-time position June 28th of 2018. So we had a year and 3 months of knowing about how she performs, right? We have some performance evaluations. People are familiar with her work. And when she was hired into that administrative specialist, we also do some written examinations. We do a management survey and a background investigation report. And it's just another piece of information that we gather when we select people. It helps sometimes verify our assessments through the interview process, and it can also give us some more information to maybe do some follow-up probing questions. So she was hired into a regular position, and now we think she'd be a great candidate for the county clerk. That's pretty much our process. Any questions for me?
Any questions on the process that was used? Supervisor Johnson, I'm assuming that you do not want to ask questions on the process.
As a matter of fact, Mr. Chair, I do.
All right, one question. Question on process.
One? Okay, at this time, I'll have one question. So you said you considered background, and you said that a background check was done, correct? That's not my one question. It's
The
a
Sheriff's
compound
Department
question.
did conduct a background investigation on the 5 finalists, yes.
And did that background investigation uncover a criminal conviction?
I don't know if that's a criminal conviction. No, I don't think it's no. See, there was some
Civil actions,
some
yes.
hits on the CCAP.
So you weren't aware of a Dodge County case 02CM112 issue of worthless checks?
Yeah, that was on there. Yep. Okay, I do recall that.
Okay, and then...
2008. And she explained that in the interview.
Correct, and then there were 6 subsequent, well, not subsequent, because one was in 01 and 02, 05, 07.
we're
No,
not going
I'm
to-
still asking the question,
You're
please.
not-
No,
I
I
said
have the
one
floor,
question.
Mr. Chair. I said it's a compound question. You're going to cut me off? I know you don't like public discussion, but please let me finish. So you have a case that says 07, 16. We learned about additional cases in 17, and there's an 18 case. Did you consider that a pattern of behavior, or did you consider that each one was an aberration easily explained away? Because, quite honestly, anybody can have one, difficulty, maybe even 2. But didn't you consider that as a pattern when hiring? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is about the screening criteria. Was this available to candidates when you posted the job? I know that I read the job posting on maybe Indeed. It came up, and that's one of the things I had a question about. Was it looked like another kind of normal job posting for Marathon County? It wasn't necessarily clear that this was what you were expecting of these candidates. So that was I know we screened out a ton of people and landed on only 5. So I guess that is my concern with the process. And I guess the other concern I have is that, we opened the applications up on July 26th and then we closed them on the 12th, but we hadn't voted on not having an election until August 27th. So I guess it's the process that it feels not quite there for me.
Well, first question, we don't publish our screening criteria out there. That's something we use internally. We base it on job-related criteria, and that's how we screen people. And so we don't really publish that. On the announcement, it might say, we're looking for these knowledge, skills, and abilities, but we typically don't post the screening criteria. And then as far as the posting time frame, I guess I would answer that. Oftentimes, I make the decision to start recruitments early just in anticipation of approval, and if not, well then we just close the recruitment, but time sometimes is of the essence, and and to be timely, sometimes I'll jump the gun on things before things are created officially. I mean, we can get the ball moving so that we're not doing without a position.
I would also add that even if the board approved an election, there would have been an appointment of an interim clerk moving forward under the state statutes.
Point of order, you're incorrect. The assistant clerk would automatically take over in that case. I read the statute too, Mr. Chair.
I will defer to Corp Counsel. Supervisor Krause.
Yes, it says so. One of the qualifications for this position is State of Wisconsin Elections Commission Certified Trainer for Municipal Clerks and Chief Elections Inspector desired. Previous election training or experience as a municipal clerk, government or county clerk office experience a plus. Is she a certified trainer for municipal clerks and chief election inspector?
Okay, let me just answer a question there. What is required for the elected county clerk is no felony convictions and a elector of the county. That's all that's required for these elected offices. When we look at hiring regular positions, we can then, those are like preferred and desirable things that we, thought would be great for a candidate to have, job-related, screening, job-related things that relate to the job. So what the state requires for a county clerk is no felony convictions and a resident of the county able to vote in the elector. Okay? But since, we kind of handle this like we do for any position, we want to look at job-related qualifications. So that's what we screened in for.
So this qualification is an iffy. It's not required.
Not required by the state. No, not at all.
Why
be
would you
great,
put it in there for qualification if you don't consider?
because we want to hire the best qualified candidate. We want to appoint the best qualified candidate for county clerk.
Supervisor Zhang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question was answered as well already. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Supervisor Schaefer.
The clerk's position is a partisan position.
The appointment is nonpartisan.
That's okay, thank you.
Any discussion? Any further discussion?
Are we talking about discussion regarding the presentation or the overall motion?
Now we're discussing the motion. Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said in closed session, and it's not talking about the issue that was discussed there, when we have an ongoing pattern of behavior, and like I said, over 30 years of dealing with the criminal justice system and dealing with individuals involved in it, anybody can have a problem once. Anybody can even run into problems twice. Especially in this day and age, you know, just about everybody's had some economic rough spots. I understand that. And, but when you have a pattern of more than 5 events spread out over a course of 15 years at semi-regular intervals, that's not an aberration. That's a pattern of behavior. It's a pattern of irresponsibility. And that's what concerns me, because this position it's the linchpin for our elections, to the chief elections officer. And we all know that in the next election cycle, we're going to have a number of elections between now and when this position goes up for election in the 2020 election cycle. So there's going to be like 4 or 5 elections between now and then. So there's a lot going on, and I believe that the citizens of Marathon County need to trust the individual who's overseeing that election, and that they need to be above reproach. And it just drives me nuts that this is the best candidate we can find with all these questions on this very, very important position that we're going to appoint. As I stated earlier, I prefer to let the public elect this person, but we're at an appointment, but it makes one vulnerable if you have a pattern of financial irresponsibility. It makes you vulnerable to outside influences. And I'm not saying it's going to happen. Ms. Trueblood might do a wonderful job. I'm not willing to take that risk. And I think the people of Marathon County should have been better informed along the way. They're going to read about it tomorrow in the paper, because I'm pretty sure the vast majority of this board is going to approve this appointment. I don't see why. I don't see why you wouldn't trust the people to make this in the first place. And I don't know why you would take the risk with our electional process. Why you would put all of that at risk. I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. But you're going to do it in all likelihood. And you're going to own it. And you better hope nothing screws up, because you're going to own it. And think about that. This is your vote. This is your chance to say yes or no for this very important appointment. I urge you to vote no. We can do better. We should do better. We have to do better in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Bovee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Expedience as a reason to deny the power of the ballot raises an eyebrow and causes a cynic to become just a little more cynical. Last month, this assembly voted to deny the public their sacred right to cast a vote for this position. This board also denied the public their right to interview candidates for this position via the campaign process. Never, in my mind, is there a good reason for denying the public their sacred right to cast a ballot. So I voted against that resolution, and I'd do it again. I also cannot possibly support any result based on that denial. Now, we have a list of criminal and civil cases filed against the candidate. Can we trust such a person to run our elections? Our integrity as a board, and our personal integrity as well, is at risk. In clear conscience, I cannot positively support this appointment, nor should you, if you have any belief in democracy at all. Thank you, sir.
I will allow the Corp Counsel to respond to a question that was posed by a supervisor about the appointment process.
Ma'am, do you still have that question?
If you have an answer, I would take it.
Here's the statute that I'm looking at. It's 17.21, sub 3. And the intro reads, vacancies in elective county offices shall be filled in the manner and for terms as follows, sub 3, county clerk, treasurer, and surveyor. In the office of county clerk, treasurer, or surveyor, by appointment by the county board for the residue of the unexpired term unless a special election is ordered by the county board, in which case the person appointed shall serve until his or her successor is elected and qualified. And
Thank you.
That's a portion of the statute, but I think that's the one that's relevant to your question.
Exactly. Thank you, Supervisor Boots.
Call the question.
Question's been called. Is there objection? Objection. Is there a second to the motion? The question's been called. A second? I understand you have an objection. So now there is a question as to whether there's a second to the motion of question being called. Is there a second to the question being called? Question's been called. There's a second. It's non-debatable. We will proceed to a vote. It does require a 2/3 majority. To end debate, we have one person on the queue at this point, and that person will be recognized per our board rules if the question that was called is upheld. We will proceed to vote. Okay, an aye vote will end debate. A no vote will allow the discussion to continue. Again, an aye vote will end debate. A no vote will allow debate to continue. And we will proceed. Debate is ended, the motion is carried, and we will proceed to vote on the motion to, excuse me, Vice Chair McEwen was the only member of this board on the queue, and he will be allowed to address the board prior to voting on the clerk appointment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a political position. I agree with Supervisor Johnson. It is a political position. However, there was no political questions or requirements when we did the interviews. It was totally based on 5 individuals that we received applications from. The interviewing board did their due diligence, I should say, asked all the questions. We all agreed that Kim Trueblood was the best person for this position. We have appointed the treasurer. We've appointed county board supervisors, in fact, ones that spoke against it, that did not get elected. However, we appointed them, and it works just fine. So there's nothing out of the ordinary about this. So I would encourage you, I wish you would have come to the interviews. I think you'd have had a different opinion of this whole situation. It was open. One supervisor chose to show up. So I just wish you would have had the opportunity to come and listen to the interviews, and I think the majority of you would have had the same opinion that the five of us did. So I'm encouraging you to support Kim Trueblood for the clerk's office, because I do agree again with Supervisor Johnson. We have some important elections coming up, and we need the most qualified person to do those elections. So please support her appointment. Thank you.
Okay, debate has now ended, and we will proceed with the vote. An aye vote is an affirmative to appoint the county, appoint Kim Trueblood to the unexpired term of the county clerk, and that expires in January of, the new county clerk would be elected in November of 2020, and the new taking oath of office in 2021. Supervisor Crosby, please vote and confirm. And we will proceed. And the motion is carried. And I would invite the oath of office, and we have the Honorable Judge Michael Moran, who will be administering the oath of office to the now appointed clerk, Kim Trueblood.
All right. As Judge of Marathon County, I'm going to administer the oath. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Kim Trueblood, who has been appointed to the office of Marathon swear and affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
Swear and affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States
And the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin.
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
And will faithfully discharge the duties of said office.
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office
To the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you. I would like to extend a congratulations to the new county clerk, and I would also like to extend a sincere thank you to Judge Moran for his willingness to spend the evening with us and witness the process and administer the oath. And so we will move on to item M, miscellaneous business. Item 21, announcements and/or requests. Any announcements and/or requests? Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. October 12th, Ringo has their annual harvest days. It's a huge, big rummage sales all over the township and big flea market. So it's a big deal. There'll be food and refreshments out there, so everybody's invited. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Stark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Finance Committee, HR and Finance, has a meeting on September 30th at the normal time, but this one is at Seaway at the Central Wisconsin Airport because it's going to be followed by our quarterly meeting with, 3 o'clock is the finance, and then right behind that is the joint meeting with finance and the airport finance. So they're both at the airport instead of here.
Okay, any other announcements? Supervisor, Durham?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 things. One is that this is the Constitution Day. On this day, in 1787, the Constitution was adopted. It did not go into effect, however, until 1789. It's 232 years old. You may know that at first, for about the first 8 years, we were under the Articles of Confederation, and it didn't work. The significance of this is there's a lot of stuff, constitutional things being discussed. And I don't know if you go back and look at it. Or, with me, I think the Constitution, Declaration of Independence are almost need to be adjoined. And I would just, as an old teacher, very old teacher, ex-teacher, I would like to mention just a couple things about the Constitution. It would be good for you to go back and read the Declaration of Independence. Wouldn't hurt any of us to do that. Because in that declaration is the principle that this country was founded on. And I wouldn't mention it, but go back and pick it out yourself and think about it. Because it relates, every time we say the Pledge of Allegiance, it relates to that. I don't know if you just go through the motions, you never think about what you're really pledging, but there's more to it than just going through a rote statement. And it also connects to the Constitution. And I would refer you to go back and read Article 4, Section 4. Look through that, and you'll see how that connects to the Declaration of Independence. Or, excuse me, not the Declaration, but the Constitution and our Pledge of Allegiance. I would also refer you to a couple other things, the Eighth Amendment and the Second Amendment. And there's a lot of discussion about the Second Amendment. Go and read it. It's a short statement. Think about it. What does it mean, really? You should do that. We all should do that. And that's all I'll say about the Constitution. It's a great document, and it never hurts to review it. Second thing I would mention is there is an airport board meeting Friday, and we'll be looking at the budget. And finally, this is the hardest thing for me. I want to thank the board for declaring September as National Suicide Awareness Month, because our family was hit really hard, devastated, almost exactly 2 years ago. So I thank you for doing that. Thank you.
Okay, we have Supervisor Schaefer.
I just want to mention that Supervisor Durham, being an ex-teacher, I believe he taught several of those signers.
I won't respond. Supervisor Krause.
Thank you, Board Chair. While we're on announcements, I'd like to mention that there is only one state to go yet for ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA, and they are hoping that that next state that will ratify will be Virginia. And Wisconsin was one of the first states to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. So I thought I'd just put that out there. Thank you.
Okay, any other announcements? I have announcements. We need signatures from Health and Human Services, the Executive Committee, Human Resources, Finance and Property, and Infrastructure. Any other announcements? Any other announcements? Seeing none, I will take the infamous motion Supervisor Langenhan has made and Supervisor Seubert seconded the motion to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
can just set them right there at that empty spot. Thank you, Craig.